Welcome, everyone, to another edition of 45 Forward, where our mission is to help you, our listeners from Los Angeles to Long Island, make your second half of life even better than the first. As we get older, it's important to find ways to embrace aging with grace, dignity, and positivity. And yes, a little humor, too. In today's episode, Barbara Paskoff and Carol Pack, two longtime friends and former award-winning journalists, offer a host of observations. And first, let's start off with how did you guys meet and come to do this book together, or your series of books together?
Well, this is mostly your story, Barbara.
Well, to begin, you want a long story or a short story?
Shorter story.
Okay. My daughter was 16 years old. I was 44. Teenage years. So here we are, teenage years. She comes home from school. I smell her breath for liquor, for alcohol. She says, "Give me a life." I said, "Better I should get one for myself." So I went back to school, New York Institute of Technology, and majoring, I don't know what I was majoring in at the time, to tell you the truth, but I knew I wanted to be a documentarian. And one day after giving I presented a video on alternative cancer therapies, the executive producer said, "Would you like to be a reporter?" I go, "I'm 44 years old. What the hell do I know about reporting?" He said, "Come on in." This was 1988. I walk into the newsroom and there I see Carol. And from that day on, Carol was my professor.
This was a working newsroom at a college. So we had students who went out and covered the news and came back, but we put on a newscast every night that was seen across Long Island on several different cable stations. So Barbara came in, and I was one of the 4 people overseeing the newsroom, and she was our fresh meat. And we learned what she could do, but more than that, her and I, being closer in age than I was with most of the other students, we developed a friendship. And it grew from there until it might have been maybe 20 years later that we actually decided to write a book together.
Now you guys wrote about a lot of different things and produced a lot of different topics, but not about aging initially. So how did that idea to come?
We did. Well, our first book was definitely about aging.
Right. But I mean, before the first series of books.
Carol and I didn't write together. Carol is a very prolific writer who was writing young adults. Why don't you tell you about you?
Yeah.
I write novels. I love novels. I love escapism because I worked in news, and news is very factual and you have to get everything right. And novels are the opposite. You know, you're making stuff up as you go along. And I thought, this is a pleasant change. So after I would work in news all day, I'd go home and I would work on fiction. So I have been working on several novels. I have a young adult series, The Library of Illumination. I have ghost stories, Evangeline's Ghost. But the first time I worked on nonfiction was when Barbara and I and another friend were out to dinner one night and talking about aging and talking about some of the funnier stuff about aging, but also some of the frightening stuff about it. And I said, we should write a book. Who wants to write a book? And Barbara raised her hand like instantly.
Right.
And I said, I will only write a book if it has to do with aging. And I don't remember how old I was at the time, but I do remember even in my 50s, when you would go into a salon or an office when they had magazines and not your iPhone, they never had anything of interest for people over 50. And I started feeling invisible, disrespected at 50. So I said to Carol, I only want to write on aging. And that was the day. Yeah. And my life changed because I had written 2 unpublished books prior. And the second book I wrote, Carol would come over from work. I mean, I was a broadcast journalist, but then I left and was working elsewhere. And I said, I'm going to write a second book. And Carol would come over once a week And it was fabulous. I'd make dinner and she would edit what I was writing. So that was nice.
Right, right. So here we have the 45 forward life in in real time here. So that's great.
Right.
Yeah. But it's not so easy. I mean, and there are, I do, recall having, these moments, as I approach 50, a little beyond of, right, the mirror experience, right, looking in the mirror and going, wait a minute,
Oh, yeah.
who is that person?
What the hell happened?
Right, right.
I just had that experience looking at myself on my cell phone when I originally dialed in to this call, because my cell phone has a lot more pixels in it than we're looking at right now. And I was like, oh, wow, I'm my grandmother. So yes, when
Yeah.
you look in the mirror and or the phone and you see something you don't expect.
What
Right.
about when you're walking, you're shopping or you're just walking on the street and you pass a mirror and you say, well, I'm slouching and I'm bent over, and all of a sudden you pick yourself up, you change your physical, your posture, and well, what were you saying about you aging?
Right, right. And then there were those moments too where you do, you're walking by sort of a younger person, and then all of a sudden they'll step out and they'll open the door for you, and you're like, do I look that unstable here?
Who was
But
the last person that opened the door today?
well, or just we're deferential in terms of just sort of like, okay, can I help you with this? It's which is fine. It's that kind of courtesy is fine, but it's a little jarring at first.
Yes, it
And
is.
and I think, actually, it was jarring for me as a man, but I think, as we talk about ageism, which is a, big topic, as you get older, it does seem that it affects women more than men in terms of the, the
Mhm.
expectations or the judgments about it. So talk about sort of this from a gender perspective. Have you guys felt that it is more of an issue for women than men?
No doubt. Absolutely no doubt. It's men have always aged more gracefully. There's less that they have to do as far as plastic surgery and keeping up with the Joneses as far as their physical appearance is concerned. I believe women are judged by their appearance
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost. Many people don't even bother to look beyond the surface. And it's very difficult for a woman. Thin is in, thin is always in. There are terrible psychological issues with body image for a woman. I don't think most men need to carry that burden and don't carry that burden.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like everything, um, yeah, women, it's very sad. It really, really is. I mean, it just pisses me off.
Right. Well, just in a more general sense, but for both men and women, I noticed in your book early on, you talk about 15 steps you can take to prevent ageism. So, what are some of the things you guys discovered yourselves in terms of how you can prevent ageism?
Well, one of the big things is if you act old, people will perceive you that way. So you should never allow people to do stuff for you that you can do yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just showing that you're viable, that you're still with it. You should be up on current events because you should be able to discuss them. The more you stay engaged in the current world and you don't play the age card and say, oh, I'm too tired, or oh, my knees hurt. You have to show people that, you're still active, you're still engaged, you're still with it. And they will treat you that way. So,
Hopefully.
well, hopefully. So that's one of the things that you really need to do. And you can't mourn the things that you've lost. You've got to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, can I add something to this?
Absolutely.
I think it's very important, and it's not easily attainable if you don't have the wherewithal to do it. But I think that if you present yourself with self-respect and a certain amount of dignity, I shouldn't say a certain amount of dignity, I think people will respond in kind.
Mhm.
That doesn't say, it depends upon who the person in front of you is, whether or not they're going to say anything or be unkind, but you don't have to accept it. If somebody says something to you, you don't like it, you go, no, 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 no. You are not talking to me this way. If
Right.
you do, talk to this.
That's it. You have to point it out to people if you think they are being ageist towards you. You
Mhm.
have to show them that, you know, what they're doing. Well, they may not think it's wrong, but
It's unkind.
it's on, and it's going to come back to haunt them when they are your age.
You know, the thing is, Ron, everybody has a past. We all have a past.
Mhm.
You could have been, I walk into a restaurant, I see a gorgeous girl there. I'm jealous. I said, oh my God, I remember when,
Mhm.
but it's her turn. But she does not know that I might have been junior prom queen in college. I might have been the captain of my basketball team. I was 10,000 different things, just saying, not saying that this is true, but we all have a past.
We do.
And that's not recognized because you are judged as an older person as what they see.
Mhm.
But I think us older people also add fuel to the fire. By that I mean, we also use negatives about ourselves. We say,
right.
oh, I'm such an old broad and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And nobody can identify you as to who you are but you.
Right. I think that, we are progressing as a society, but in some cases, just because we have to. For one thing, we're all getting older. We're living longer, and so the population shift is toward older people. And I think even for
Million,
me,
by the way, I don't mean to interrupt you,
go
but
ahead. No.
I do that well. There are 60 million older people,
More than.
more than,
Right.
according to Pew.
Right. Well, I think it's important too that even dealing with the language, I know I've been talking with people about what do we do with this word senior? Because to me, it's like, you know what?
Another,
Yeah, senior is like, you know what? You're a senior if you're graduating from high school or college. That's a senior in your class. But as you get older, I don't even know what that word means because I just did an article about one of my aunts, my Tia Dory, who is just turned 101, and she is as vital as ever. I mean, I'm sure she's not as physically active as she was, but she's pretty active, and she paints every day. She's on the computer every day. She's texting and emailing her grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so I think we're sort of settling right now on just like not older people. That's it.
Older adults is what we should refer to everyone.
Yeah, yeah, younger and older adults. Yeah,
go call up the government and go tell them that we've
right.
rephrased the
Yeah,
great Panthers, senior citizens, all of that
right,
hogwash.
right. So I think that, as you mentioned, and I think it is important to recognize too that as we make this transition, that it's going to take a while, and there's still a lot of, it seems like age segregation and senior, derogatory remarks about seniors are still kind of the last bastion of acceptability, right, of discrimination. So I think, people just need to, as you pointed out, to, you know, firmly but affirmatively say, no, that's not what we're about, and you will see soon enough. And there are plenty of good things about, as we'll get to a lot of things in your books, but there are pluses and minuses to aging. We can't just ignore, the fact that you're not physically as robust as you were when you were younger, but in many cases, you're mentally more robust, you're more experienced, right? You know a lot
Yes.
more.
Much more wisdom that you picked up over the years, much more experience, that younger people, they don't know it. They can't read your mind. They can't see into your soul. But you, as you grow older, you just have this wealth of information that has made up your life that you can draw from. And I think we should all embrace that
Absolutely.
and, just use it the best they can.
Right. Right. Even when you talk about, oh, you can't remember some things, and I always consider that like that's just basically an overstuffed cabinet up there. I have so many things that I'm on my mind now that I never had when I was 10 or 20. So I don't get freaked out if I need to recall something. I just turn and ask my wife, and we work it out together. But I think that and we'll talk about this more after the break, because we need to take a quick break right now. But it's a short break. So folks, when we come back, we'll be talking much more with Barbara Paskoff and Carol Pack, co-authors of the Over 60 Shades of Grey series. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. We're talking with Barbara Paskoff and Carol Pack, the co-authors of a very funny new book called Over 60 Shades of Grey, Book of Lists, the fourth of their Over 60 Shades of Grey series. So first of all, before we could go on, just tell where can I get your book?
Well, let me show you a picture. We
Okay.
see this.
Mhm.
We are on Amazon. We are on Barnes and Nobles.
Mhm.
We are on
Apple Books,
Apple Book.
Kobo, Smashwords, whatever online retailers are available, they have our books.
Right. Right. And so this is the fourth in your series, the Book of Lists. So tell me a little bit about that, about your take on why you decided to do a Book of Lists.
Well, I have very little patience as I get older. I'm now in my 70s. And I find that when I want to look something up and I'm reading all of this stuff that's coming out of the author's head, I'm thinking, no, where's the meat? Get to the bottom line. I need to see the answers now. And when I was thinking that, I thought we should just do like bullet points. We should have a book of bullet points that just get to what we really want to know. So I proposed the idea to Barbara, and she said, "Oh, I agree." And we came up with a book of lists.
Mm-hmm.
And started brainstorming on different types of sections and different things we could cover. And then we sort of just,
It took off. I thought of things, but what's interesting, what Carol said is, as I was always impatient. As I'm older, I'm more impatient. But at my age, I have to get through the article. I don't even know if I'm going to make it to the end because it's and by the fourth paragraph, if you're lucky, you have what you were looking for. Now, what I've learned to do is, as I'm reading something online, let's just say, I'll go automatically to the fourth paragraph. And willy-nilly, I do find it.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
We've learned a lot writing these lists, I have to tell you, with the subject.
Well, these listicles are very popular, whether they're articles or they're books. So I think this,
yeah.
That's cute.
yeah. So let's talk about some of the categories in the books you talk about. So the first is one of them I want to talk about is attitude, which I think does play a large part as you age and age well or not. So talk a little about attitude, about because you mentioned a lot about what I call resilience and ability, to accept life, or what I call radical acceptance, but also then being able to rebound from loss, which is a natural part of life, right?
Yep. Especially you turn around. Well, when you say what's your attitude in just how we feel about aging?
How we approach aging, how we approach life, I mean, there's been a lot of talk, right, about positive attitudes, but in general, it's positivity plus it's a little bit of attitude, right?
Well, let me
But
tell you, it's not all
humor.
positive. Well, this is the way I feel.
Yeah.
First of all, when people say, "How are you? How's aging?" and I say, "I can't believe I'm 70, yada, yada," Well,
Mhm.
it's better than the alternative.
Right.
If you're asking me how I feel, I am telling you how I feel. Don't dismiss it by saying, well, it's better than the alternative. You're
Right.
asking me how I feel. I think what that does, when you judge it or dismiss it, you are preventing somebody from sharing their truth. And that I find very aggravating.
Mhm.
Having said that, you need a lot of courage. Who was
Mhm.
it? Bette Davis that said
Betty Davis.
it takes a lot of courage. It does. I
Right.
mean, I cannot believe I am my age, but what I have learned to do as far as dealing with it is I have written down an acceptance sheet.
Mhm.
What I'm grateful for. And
Mhm.
I try, and then on the next side, there's Carol, you see it right up there, it says acceptance.
Mhm.
And that word acceptance means a lot. It has a lot of components. But if you're grateful for what you have and not for what you don't have,
Right.
I think that's step one.
Right.
Mhm.
And Carol, what
That
about you?
I,
Some of your thoughts?
I believe that it's easier to accept a lot of the things that are happening as we get older if we look at it with a little bit of humor.
Mhm.
It was Mary Poppins who said a spoonful of sugar
Right.
helps the medicine.
Right.
Well, it's 100% correct. You have to look for the positive or the humor in everything that's happening. Everything has a positive, and
Mhm.
you have to look for that sometimes, but it will make you feel better. Yes, we're getting old, but we're wiser. Yes, we're getting old, but we're still here and we're experiencing what's going on in the world today. Yes, maybe my knees are weaker than they used to be, but that's okay because I'm still able to walk. There are people who may not be able to. You always have to look for the positive in what is going on in your own life.
Mhm.
And if you could do it with a little bit of humor,
A lot.
it makes it a little bit easier to take. And we
Yeah.
do it with a lot of humor.
We do it with a lot of humor.
But a
Yeah.
lot of our humor is cartoons.
Oh,
We
please,
do
you
have
and I are very funny, Carol.
we do have our sides, but we do like cartoons. We like um, positive yet funny sayings. We
Mhm.
like quotes.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. We
Yeah.
like all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's why we like writing together, because when we're looking at the cartoons or the quotes, we're laughing about it.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's just a joy to write with her. I mean, funny, and wonderful. And she's very smart. Carol is very smart. Her grammar is impeccable.
Oh, but oh, I forgot what I was just going to say.
Now,
Keep going.
what does that sound like? What does that feel
Yeah.
like?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know what? One of the things that I think is important too is a sense of perspective. I mean, so we always talk about, um, well, the positive things about aging and things that are not so great. What I've thought about is like, maybe it would be helpful, to sit down and, say, okay, well, what were some of the things early in my life that weren't so great?
Yeah.
Because you tend to forget that, and then you'd say, well, oh God, that was terrible. There was this book I read a while ago called The Good Old Days. They were terrible. You know?
That's perfect.
Yeah, and I think
That's
that
perfect.
we I think especially with our kids, yeah, we have what I call benevolent amnesia, which is we sort of, in order to move forward and appreciate life, we sort of forget about, let go of the things that weren't so great.
The
But
teenage angst and the
yeah,
acne, and
I never had acne.
well, neither did I.
You
yeah.
have some wonderful sayings, I have to say.
Well, great.
I
And
love them. We're going to steal them.
yeah, absolutely. A film writer, documentary that producer that I worked with once, just turned to me once and he said, you know what? if something's good, steal it. So I think and I think that's true of a lot of things, but or repurpose it. But certainly, I think that to be aware that the earlier part of life wasn't that great. Being as we know, um, two things. One is that when people look at depression and anxiety and stress, the
Mhm.
the highest incidence of these uh, of this sort of stuff is when you're in your late 60s, early 70s, and even higher, your early 20s. So being in your 20s and 30s ain't so great. And that we find that, as we get through middle life and the stress level goes down, conversely, we look at when are people happiest. And it turns out, right, it's sort of when you're older. That as you get into your 70s, 80s, people say like, this is the happiest part of my life.
Mhm.
Because they don't have to get up in the morning to an alarm clock, because they get senior discount. There are a lot of good things about getting older. And when you are faced with it, you don't react to things as wildly or as you used to when you were.
Aggressively as you used to when you were younger. And plus the fact, hopefully by the time you get to our age, a lot of the issues you have had have sort of been ironed out.
Mhm.
So that angst is more or less not gone. It can rear its ugly little head every so
That's
often,
true.
Mhm.
but it's different.
Right. But one of the yeah. Did you want to add something, Carol, or
No, that's okay. Keep going.
good? So one of the things we do have to really pay attention to make sure that these years are, golden years, however you want to characterize them, is our health and fitness. So that's something we really need to pay attention to. So, but again, you guys do it through a listicle approach of like, all right, let me give you a list of what you need to do. So, what are some of those things we need to pay attention to in a quick sort of bullet point form?
I think a couple of things. I think you need to listen to your body.
Hmm.
If you are feeling a certain way for a couple of days, I think you should check it out. Too many people, denial is a huge word
Hmm.
that can have many consequences. If you're not feeling well, if you have certain symptoms, do not go to online, do not look it up. Your first line of defense is your doctor. That's number one. So, what was the other question?
What about some of the bullet points about being fit? What are the things that you guys do to stay fit?
Well, you have to stay engaged, as Carol said. You have to read. You have to perhaps volunteer and make yourself feel good for yourself. But as you make other people feel good, that is a payback because you're feeling good.
Play
Mhm.
tennis.
Play tennis, compete ballroom dancing, stay physically active, write like Carol does, noon and night. It would be morning, but you get up a little later, right?
But for me, Barbara likes to go out and do activities. She goes
I'm a very physical person.
to
Mhm.
play tennis.
Yeah.
I'd rather just jump on the treadmill that's in the corner of the bedroom and not have to go out to seek my way of staying fit. So different people can do it in different ways.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's the key.
There's no cookie cutter for anything. When you read these articles, what to do, what to do, what to do.
Right.
It's like, well, I really know what to do. It's doing it.
That's
Right.
it.
Yeah. And I think it's being sort of focused on doing it intermittently. You don't have to. So like Carol, do a lot of writing, but
Mhm.
it's constantly figuring out ways to get up from my desk and to do something else. And
Well, that's important, Ron. You're a writer also.
yeah,
You're there. It's not healthy to continually sit in one place.
right.
It
Yeah.
really is. Get up, walk around like you're on an airplane. You have to get up and walk around.
Yeah. And it can be really tough if you don't do it. I just saw you talk about cartoons. I just saw our cartoon in the recent New Yorker, where is a guy in a torture chamber, and he's got the person he's torturing, and he's showing him all his inventive equipment to do torture, and then he points to this. All it is a slab with a computer in front, sort of a computer in front of him, and he says to the guy, he says, "Hey, don't kid yourself. You sit in front of this thing for 7 hours, and you'll see what it does to your back." So
Oh,
it's true. It really
yeah.
can do a lot of damage. And I think that you'll be happy to know, Barbara, that when I was talking with a longevity expert a few weeks ago, and he was talking about the importance of exercise, and he said, well, actually, the best exercise you can do, if you're willing to do it, is dance. You know,
Mhm.
because that involves all sorts of three-dimensional movement and activity and social activation and so forth. So it really it checks a lot of boxes, so to speak.
Well, let me add to that. It helps your memory because you
Mm.
have to remember the dance steps. So you're talking about choreography. Your mind is constantly going.
Mhm.
And you just, for me, when I started ballroom dancing, I would go in not feeling so it's not a happy day every day. I would
Mhm.
leave, I left feeling happy all the time. So it's a great stress reducer. It's a great memory block builder. It is just all around healthy, good, and fun.
Mm. Very nice. I agree. I agree. My
Mhm.
wife
You
and I,
dance? Did you dance?
not competitive dancing, but
Well, that's all right.
my wife and I enjoy dancing. We go out and we just swing around, and people look at us and go, well, that's a very interesting modified Peabody. And we're like, I don't know what that means, but we're having fun. And
There
you
you
really
go.
feel it. You really feel it, and it's a terrific thing to do.
It is.
So yes, exercise, exercise, exercise in any way you can. And certainly there are things I do now that I didn't do before. Where I say to people, you'd worry about when you go to places and you're meeting and you're parking and you're trying to get as close as you can, right, to the entrance of the building. Now it's like, I don't care. I'll park far away. That's 50 more steps I get in. So
That's exactly correct. That's
yes,
it. Yeah,
right.
like don't take the elevator, go up.
Exactly.
Or
Exactly.
go down.
Exactly. Right. So, folks, we're going to take another short break, but when we come back, we have a lot more to talk about in our last segment with Barbara Paskoff and Carol Pack, the co-authors of Over 60 Shades of Grey, their series, their latest one, The Book of Bliss. So don't go anywhere. We have a lot more to talk about. Welcome back, folks. Once again, I'm talking with Barbara Paskoff and Carol Pack, the co-authors of the Over 60 Shades of Grey series. Now, before the break, we were talking about exercise and the importance of it. I just wanted to shift during this segment to talk a little bit about relationships, because, of course, this is one of the issues as we get older that changes also. And I think that sometimes one of the issue is we don't recognize it, that change is part of life. And we think about ourselves years earlier, like, yeah, but we're not that person anymore. We're all changing. So how do you guys approach, natural change in life, especially as it affects relationships?
I think the relationship, I don't think there's a set plan. I think it's how the person you have had a relationship with before is now responding to you and you responding back to them, how you want them to be in your life, what part of your life, or like garbage, you want to take them to the curb and let the sanitation people take them away, which I have found most often is what I do. Um, Sometimes an individual grows and the
Hmm.
people that they are around don't, or they're tied up in a lot of the petty minutia things and the high school stuff. I don't want to do that. So I have to find out the red flags in the
Hmm.
relationship because there are many red flags. Do I want to start a new friendship? Well, the answer, very honestly, is no, unless that person, I'm not saying I'm a wonderful person. Well, I am, but I'm not saying anything like that. It's just that I'm more picky now.
Hmm.
Because if I go out, and since COVID, I must tell you the truth, I could stay home every day. it's become exhausting just to do certain things. So I had to push myself. But relationships for me now, if they're like Carol, I have very few friends. You know how people say you have, oh, I have so many friends. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of acquaintances that if
Right.
I never see again would be fine. But I have about 5 very, very close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my life
Mm-hmm.
as far as relationships are concerned.
Yeah. Carol, what about you?
More of a stay-at-home person than Barbara is. So my circle of friends is small. I have a very good relationship with my family, but I don't see a lot of my relatives as often as I used to, although I do keep in touch with them. So my relationships have changed. When you're younger, you're out there more, you're more aggressive, you're getting together more, you're doing things. When you get older, it's more about I don't want to
Comfort.
say a mental
But
relationship.
comfort, right?
Yeah,
You're more
you-
comfortable.
It's that you're comfortable and that you're sharing ideas. You don't necessarily get together as much, but you share more of what your life is all about.
Yeah, I think the time that you spend with, as you age, you want more quality time
Mm-hmm.
with the people that you are with.
It's not all about eating and drinking
No.
and seeing a show. It's more about talking and engaging and
Sharing feelings and sharing life, a lot of philosophizing possibly. There you
Right.
have it.
There you go.
Very neat.
Very neat. A good bullet point. I like that.
There you go. It's holistical, as you
Right.
say.
Right. So what are the things you need to do if you need to change it and change a relationship? I mean, is there, I guess you mentioned, Barbara, that you need to first look for the red flags or just any flags
I didn't learn that.
or the white flag.
And well, that's a surrender.
Right. Well,
Well, let them. I learned about red flags in my 40s and 50s because, you
Mhm.
know, when you're younger, you just willy-nilly, you go out, you do.
right.
There are relationships which we have listed in the book, what to look for. A couple of red flags. No, wait, I'm already losing it. You asked for what the red flags are? I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay. If you meet a person that is, you just met a person and they constantly talk about themselves and they are very revealing and they don't let you into the conversation, that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
If you are with somebody or making plans with somebody and the thought of that somebody makes you uncomfortable, that's a red flag.
Right.
If you see how that person responds to other people, if they're not kind, etc., that's a red flag.
Right.
I figure 3 is good.
Yeah. And I think that these are things that are red flags when you're younger, but I think in some ways, one of the things about getting older and more experience is you see them quicker and you react to them quicker.
100%.
Right.
Because people have, to this day, toxic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
be it in marriage, and it's very hard to change and it's very uncomfortable. If you want to change a relationship, I think it's very important in a very kind way to have a conversation with that person because there could be potential to rectify a relationship. So speak to the person. You have to be honest and see how they respond and take it from there.
Right. Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is if you feel comfortable or less than when you are with somebody, be it their behavior or not, you need to leave the relationship.
Right. One of the things that inevitably comes up in any aspect or age of our society is sex. Like, so now as we live longer, it's like, well, what's sex like after 60? What should it be? What do we do? And so forth. So what are your bullet points on dealing with issues of sex?
let me just say right at the offset, I'm a Catholic school girl, so I didn't write any of the sex stuff because I'm repressed.
Okay.
Well, I'm not. And I
Right.
can say at my age, sex is a schlep.
Okay.
It is a schlep, but we do have a list. If you don't want to engage, so as not to make your partner uncomfortable or feel bad, there are certain things you can say. Let's say your partner comes home, be it male or female, and they just feel like being romantic, for lack of a better word, or a dirtier word. Anyway, so you can say, well, let's make a date for tomorrow, or I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, I have every physical thing going on and I can't. But there's a way. Sex to some people, even at 60, I have a friend, I have to tell you something, she's hot to try. I think it's so individual. I really, really do. It's so individual. There are no fast rules for anything. Seriously. I mean, sometimes I think as far as sex is concerned, sometimes all you really need to be close is hug. That is so wonderful. It's just a hug without the anticipation of having it go any further. To make that emotional connection, to me, is very important.
Right. Right.
At any age.
At any age. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So as we move forward, 45 forward, 55, 65, 75 forward. So one of the things that is coming up more in as we get older is that there are certain fears. And one of them, I think from what I understand, there are the two biggest fears are, running out of money and literally losing your mind, dementia, possibly of dementia. So what are the things that sort of keep you guys up at night in terms of what are the worries as we get older, and what do we do about that? Well, how can we calm our stress about this? I'll start with you this time, Carol.
I think one of the things that I think about often is aging in place. I want to be able to age in place. And whether that has to do with finances or whether that has to do with how our home is set up. I think about that a lot. A lot of the lists that involve things that you should have to age in place, I wrote because I worry about it all the time. I want to make sure that I live in a safe environment, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to age outside of my home. I'm very comfortable at home and want to do everything I can to stay there for as long as possible. And so I think about things. My husband and I, we talked about wooden floors. Everybody loves wooden floors. And I said, no, we need to have carpeting because at our age, if we should fall, carpeting is a soft thing to land on. And we'd probably make out better in our old age if we have carpeting. And I think about this kind of stuff all the time that I don't think normal people think about, but
Right. Yeah.
so be it.
Yeah. Well, as long as it's carpeting,
Smart.
as long as it's carpeting and not throw rugs, because that's,
Oh, slippery.
right. Yeah. Well, tripping hazards. Yeah. So then you have to watch out for that. So that's important. Yeah. Yeah. And what about you, Barbara? What do you worry about as you go forward? And how do you? Okay.
I have a lot less time forward than I had behind me. But well, that is serious. But I also, and I'm very athletic. I worry about falling. I also worry about finances. I also worry about losing my head. I remember, you get, like you said earlier, you have file cabinets up there, and there's so much. I spoke to my shrink, and I said to him, I said, I think I'm losing my mind. I think I'm on the L already, for Alzheimer's. I don't remember this or that or this or that. And he said, when you walk into the kitchen and you're looking in for something, what did I do? What did I come here for? That's one thing. If you walk into the kitchen, turn around, look at the refrigerator, and you don't know what it is, then you need to make an appointment.
Right.
So I use that as my guide.
Right.
But yeah, I have probably the same fears. I am concerned about the people that I love leaving. It's a rude awakening.
Yeah.
Life has become, I think, important in that, for me personally, I feel more vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
because I'm older.
Yes.
I feel much more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I try to say, okay, this is enough, no more head. Let's think of something else.
Right.
And I try to change the thought process.
And
Yeah.
that's when you need a little bit of humor to come
Mhm.
in to make it that change, to make it a more positive moment.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think also, as you guys indicate just by your presence together, is that you need to maintain a social network, that sense of connection. Um,
Yeah.
because I think that's one thing I've talked about a bit in my podcast about, one of the things we learned from the pandemic is how important that social engagement was, and that when people were, um, just in their apartments alone or their houses alone, especially older people,
Right.
it was really deadly in some cases.
That's right.
So you really need to maintain that kind of connection.
It's very important. Well, who was it that said no man is an island? Who was
Right.
that?
You
But who
ask me
was
this
that?
all the time, and I can never remember.
That wasn't Walt Whitman, was it?
I don't
Well,
believe.
I'll look it up after.
Yes. Well, that's
That's another thing that happens as you get older. I don't let things pass by. If I don't know something, I have to right away look it up.
well, that's one of the things that's nice about our age is that it's like I'll just Google it, you know.
It's
And
true.
Google is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr.
So
Google.
right. So, folks, unfortunately, the time flies by. I've had a great time talking with you. I've enjoyed the show, and it was both funny and enjoyable and informative. So I just want to thank you for the show. And again, if people want to get in touch with you or want to get in touch with you or get your book, are there better ways to get in touch with you through a website or through your emails
Yeah.
or what?
They could just email us at info, INFO,
Okay.
at over 60 shades of gray, all written out. Gray is
Mhm.
spelled with an A.com.
Okay. Okay. Um,
And we do have a website.
okay.
Is that the website?
Yes.
No,
Over
www.over60shadesofgray.com.
Gray with the GRAY.com.
Correct. And
Right.
60 spelled out.
Right. Got it. Okay, good. So, once again, folks, and also I would just want to mention you guys are on Facebook and LinkedIn, so people can connect with you there, right?
Not on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook.
Oh, Instagram and Facebook. Okay, very
But if
good.
you like, we'll go into LinkedIn.
That's up to you. That's up to you.
Okie doke. Thank you
Anyway.
so much for having us. Ron.
Okay, so folks, be sure to join me next Monday, 12 noon Pacific time and 3 p.m. Eastern time, when I'll be talking with Rona Loshak and Natalie Karp, two experts who will provide us with an indispensable primer on long-term care insurance, a critical option for paying for long-term care, which 2/3 of older adults will need in some form as they age. So, folks, until then, keep moving forward, 45 forward.